So I want to welcome to the show Joseph Powell and Daniel Sala. Joseph is our special guest again, and Daniel's going to lead with the questions. I don't know if y'all want to further introduce yourselves or make any announcements before we get started.
So yeah, just that I'm glad we got to schedule one with Joseph, because I think he's one of the most, if not the most complex of all the accounts. His recall is really vivid, and is the only one to have served on all these different sides. And also he is not very well known, which I think works in his favor. I mean, speaks to his credibility. If you get too big of a name, I think that usually is not a good indication. So my first question for him was, what brought you to the realization that you were part of the programs?
I mean, it mainly started when I was a kid. I knew I was a part of something. I didn't quite know what it was. That was when I was around 8 years old, and then by the time I was 12, I knew something crazy had happened to me, because I remember, like, I vividly remembered stuff, and like actually remembered things happening, like ships and stuff were flying around me. And it took a little while later where I started to understand what I was really a part of, and that was because I stumbled into the community I stumbled into, because I kept looking into UFOlogy, because that's what I kept turning up with. Like, some of my memories were like UFOs, and then some of it was just being picked up by people that dressed in military get up, So that's pretty much how it started for me, and it was mainly I started stumbling into the community and started seeing these people and recognizing their faces.
Right.
And then some of them clicked with my memories, and I started talking about them. I did my first interview
with Zan.
With San John, and I came out and was talking about one of the guys that I had remembered at the farm, the Misty Isle Farms, and then from that point, I had mentioned, I think I had mentioned Penny, and Penny brought me on her show, and we started talking, and we did like one or two interviews, and then I started talking about how I remembered her, and we discussed a lot of her major memories of the person she served under, and she realized that it was me. Like, we started discussing it, and
that was something she had discussed years prior.
Yeah, and I didn't even really know too much about that. Like, I had stumbled into her stuff, but I didn't really understand a whole lot. But I recognized her. I just didn't know specifically where from, other than the ship, and I didn't understand it. Which I've gotten a whole lot of different memories back from that specific altar, and then a bunch of different altars, and then I ran into like Matt Tracy and quite a few other individuals that have come across me now, and it just keeps rolling out. Basically, the more I meet these people, the more memories come up with them.
Yeah, and I think your first trigger was actually Jason Rice, who's retired.
Yes, Jason Rice. When I saw him, that's when I started understanding that it was a space-based situation. Was when I saw Jason Rice on Gaia TV, and when he started talking about that device that erases your memories that was in that room, I remembered it, because that was part of a lot of my memories that started coming back from one of my main altars, John. And that's what really captivated me, and I started watching that stuff until I watched all of it. And I recognized the other individual that was there, which is Tony Rodriguez, and that helped me understand just different situations, and I've started to compile it where I know which altars were in which memories now, and like I've had to dig through false memories and all sorts of stuff since then.
Yeah, so I'm guessing the more people you recognize and dig into their work, the more memories follow through, right? And before you used to have some fragments, but you just compartmentalized them and figured they were just dreams, right?
Yeah, and then I've come to find now that it's not even just that. It's like my altars are active in the here and now too. So they take over and I black out. And I've had long conversations with my wife now where like I was doing a lot of stuff that I don't even remember doing, still even to this day. Like I'll black out thinking I'm having a conversation with her, and I go unconscious and my altar takes over and starts talking to her. And a few of my altars, they hate my wife, like extremely. So it's caused a lot of problems.
That's the altars that are not integrated.
Yeah.
And what do you think makes you more able to remember than most?
To be honest, I don't know. It just comes to me, and it's like I can like when I talk to people, my alter John tends to surface and go into their minds and help compartmentalize like what they're remembering, and then start putting it in chronological order so that it helps them remember more. And they tend to get a lot more memories from that, especially when we have interactions. But I only do that when people are willing to,
Well, I asked that because it's quite a rarity. Usually it gets, triggered by specific things like MRIs or like activations, deliberate ones. So also, I think you mentioned talking to many of the higher ups in the programs that are human on the phone, like Nachtwaffen, Admiral. And do any of these higher ups remember? Are all of them mind wiped?
No. I spoke to Vernon E. Clark, which was head of the Navy around 2002. And I spoke to him not that long ago, like maybe a year back or something like that. But he was in charge of the ship that I was on, one of the big vessels that I served on, that my alter John served on. I haven't talked to anybody that was over me in Nachtwaffen, not that I know of. I mean, I've had interactions with a few people that were above me that were like when I was in a different altar. But no, the only person that I've ever gotten to get a hold of was that naval second. I think he was I don't think of what his rank was. Joint Chief of Staff. He was the head of the Navy for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And most of the people that I know that I remember that were in leadership positions over a lot of these programs were in the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Right. So I'm guessing that none of them that you tried your luck at ever remember just from, or hit it very well, right? But also you mentioned the implanted memories. Like, would you say that those are, to tell them apart, those are limited in length and in complexity, or what do you use to discern this between real and implanted?
Well, a lot of it, how do I put it? Like, a lot of the real memories will come with emotions, like real emotions. You'll get like emotions of hatred, sick. You'll feel sick. Um, you'll get, you might have emotions of love depending on the memory that's surfacing. Some of them make me break down and cry. Like it's pretty bad. And it's like I don't just get my own emotions. I also get like emotions of that altar in the moment, and then I also get the emotions of the people that altar was interacting with. And like their feelings towards him, whichever different altar it is. And then with the false implanted memories, it's like it's not always easy, but normally you don't get those emotions. It's more like a lot of my false implanted memories are more thinking I was more heroic, like, oh, I'm doing good things. Whereas once you look past those, you realize you weren't doing good things. A lot of what you're doing were evil still, See, sometimes you get a lot of people in the community where they do remember a lot of the evil stuff they did, and then they get some memories that they think are just good, and they want to grab a hold of those and believe them 100%, which is understandable. I mean, compared to like a lot of the memories I've talked about, none of them are really good, to be honest.
Yeah, but also I would guess that you can't really fake scenarios that last so many years either, right? They're too multi-layered.
Yeah, well, it's like with my wife, like I disappeared for like 3 months. I was still going to work. I left my car at the house. My work's like 45 minutes away. I was still showing up to work. Didn't have my vehicle was still parked outside for the whole 3 months. She didn't know where I went. My phone was off. Um, my kids didn't even know where I was. You know, nobody did.
And where were you?
And from what I've had memories come back. I was working for one of my altars, and like I got picked. I would go to work, get off of my job, and then I would walk around back, and like I would go and I'd basically pass out in a ditch, and then I would get picked up because I had memories of kind of waking up somewhat, and then like there was people that were dressed like decked out in black military fatigues, and they had like rifles. They were like Earth-based unit, but they had a ship that was cloaked, and like the back end would open up, and you could see the back end, but everything else around it was cloaked. And they would grab me and basically carry me on the ship, and then I would interact with this Draco-looking being, and he would tell me what my orders were, and then I would end up going and doing different missions.
Wow. And have you counted roughly the number of altars, and how many of those would you say you've integrated?
To my knowledge, for the altars that I've integrated so far, the major one that I've integrated is John. My altar
Solar
Pindar
Warden.
I haven't. Yeah, my altar Pindar I haven't integrated, but he openly allows me to see things. But that's because he wants more control. I have my altar Jonah, which I'm in the process of still integrating. He's my more volatile altar, and he's basically the altar that if I get attacked, he'll physically protect my body. He just takes over.
And some of, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I've come up with a list of different names for different altars I have at this point, and it's way past the 10 I originally thought.
Mm.
You know.
Yeah. And do you feel the difference when they're in a clone body versus
Pretty
when they're
intense, because
in?
1 second.
Okay.
Some of them are in clone. Most of them are in clone bodies that I know of. Some of them aren't. Most of the ones that served in Nakwaffen were in my original body. But a lot of the other groups that I was with, they were in clones.
And does it feel different when you're in a clone?
No, not really. It's like you're basically in your own body. It's a clone of you. The only difference is like there's a baby soul that's there that's suppressed.
Yeah.
Kind of like when I talk about blacking out and my altered surfacing, it's basically the same thing, except for you can feel the other soul there, you know, and it's just lingering in the back of the drop.
Except sometimes they can even look different, the clones, right? You said they had a blonde one.
They can look different. I do have an altar that they created for me where they change the hair color and stuff. I don't recall any other altars where they changed anything that would displace what I look like, but there might be. I think I had like an altar that they made it into a woman too.
And I think at one point you even met one of your clones, right? One of your altars met another one of your altars.
From what I remember, like I had an altar that was serving on a Nakwaffen ship, and he met a group of other people that met a clone of me, and they were telling me about him, and they
right?
thought that I was him. Yeah, having that memory come back, and I had false memory embedded with those real memories too that I had to go through, and I had some help removing that, like not forgetting it, but just removing it so I could see what the real memories were.
But technically, you could even meet your main self, right? Because, for example, you served in that 90 and back with the Ashtar command, and we'll get to that later. But technically, you can even meet like 100 of yourself. It's just that that's kind of a violation of time travel, right?
I mean, not necessarily. I mean, they can just show up if they want to, you know. I mean, there's nothing that can really stop them other than the people that they're serving under.
So you could just have 100 of you in your main altar simultaneously?
Yeah, I mean, it's time distortion, but yeah. All of them are in the same timeline. Like they're not in separate timelines, you know. So it's like they take you out of where you're from, and you serve in the same timeline, just in a different location. and then they either, you're either in a clone body, so you still have your child body, frozen, or you're in your real body, and then they age regress you, and then they put you back where they got you from.
Right, but there has to be something that limits this, because otherwise you would just, repeat the process and create armies that way. I would guess someone has to be overseeing this process. That's just my guess, but anyway.
I would assume that there probably are laws in place, because a lot of even getting the tech, like they still had to sign contracts for the technology that they got,
Right.
on how to use it and stuff. Like you can't just misuse a lot of the technology that we have.
And how about after your first career return and mind wipe, did you had accelerated your childhood and felt more mature?
I mean, you're still cutting out, but I think I got the gist of it. Yeah. When I came back when I was 12, I didn't feel like I was a 12-year-old anymore. I felt like I was older. Same when I was 8.
Right.
I never really same situation. I don't. It's a rarity that I hang around with people that are younger than me. Most of the people I hang around are either 5 years to 10 to 20 years older than I am.
Mm-hmm. And I believe your conclusion about the people that run is that they're not human, and that humans are just alien proxies, basically, who are on a covert war on their behalf, right? On the aliens' behalf.
I mean,
Avatar in so many words.
I think some of them probably for sure could be used as avatars, as long as they can embed their genetics into their bodies. They can use them in that manner. Yes.
And how about humanity as a
To
whole?
my knowledge.
Let's say the human leadership, how much of it is under mind control, and how much is naturally inclined to like these darker waves of like subjugating people?
Well, I mean, you have the 13 families amongst others, and this was recently talked about again by with Penny and Matt. But you have a lot of these bloodline families, and they normally work under the Pindar, and I think like whoever these parents are, I don't recall ever meeting them, but those are more like the hybrid humans, and what they do is they give the orders, and they're the ones with their fingers dipped in pretty much everything um, on the face.
Maybe drop a couple names. I hate to bother you, but while you're going, would this be like the royal family, Rockefellers, Rothschilds, DuPont? Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Sorry. Anyway, continue with the dipped in fingers everywhere.
Yeah, so I mean, they basically finance all the stuff, but the people that are in charge of them are you don't ever see them. Nobody's ever seen them, and you're not going to. And those are more people that aren't as human.
Yeah, but also the runners of the programs, from what I understand, aren't as much concerned in terms of disclosure with the public at large finding out about these secret operations, but more so with the hybrids, the people who have been specifically hybridized, because they don't, for fear of them being activated. Am I right?
I would assume to a certain level, of course. I mean, if your own weapons are activated against you, like it doesn't benefit you.
Right.
And if people as a whole that are a part of this, part of the community at large, which there's a numerous amounts throughout this planet, if they all started waking up and integrating their altars, it wouldn't be hard for them to start jumping into the clone bodies that they're inhabiting, or jumping to where their real body's being used in other locations and screwing shit up.
Yeah.
And if you get enough of them, you can bring down most of these programs.
That I think is the real key that they're trying to conceal. But let's jump into some of the projects that you were involved in. I believe that IBIS was the first chronologically, right? Because you were just an infant, and that was your first time loop.
It was more like the first one that branched off of. It was Montauk, and then because of Montauk, I remember IBIS basically happened because of that. So it's like it was time travel. They time traveled back in time and used me for that program for Project Ibis.
Was it in the
But if
Pindar
you're going chronologically, yes, Ibis was first. No, actually, that altar's name I recently found. Someone help me pull out that altar's name. 1 second. Pull it up right now.
And also, do you remember how long this time loop, assuming it was a time loop, was?
To my knowledge, that altar's still active.
Right.
Because he was active around the time with when a lot of the more major people came out originally. You know.
And is that the altar that later made its way into Black Manta?
No, totally different altar.
I bet.
Sorry, I have lists now. It's not. 1 second. That altar is that served at Ibis. His name is Paul. That's P.
Oh, interesting. Oh, yeah.
And
That wasn't part of your original 10.
No, it wasn't. And then you asked about what other one?
The Black Manta.
The Black Manta, that was my altar Jonah.
Uh-huh.
The one that's active even in the here and now.
And just before we move on, because you made a recent post that was quite interesting about that
Project
one.
Alltech.
About the Jonah, I guess. You were tasked to find Atlantis equipment by certain octopus-looking ETs that had arms and legs and that had very strong telepathy.
Yeah, they were working alongside our naval intelligence. And it started when I was 8. They took me and cloned me. And we basically were raised. We worked on that base and we worked in other bases, but that was one of the main ones. And what they did is after they trained us to use our psi abilities and taught us how to defend ourselves, then what they did is they sent us in these suits, these black suits that you could wear underwater, and they had like these things that you can put on that you would wear on your feet, but they were jets, and you had like this face mask, and you could basically swim pretty fast, and they had other tools and tech that you could use to get further undersea. But like there is a portion of Atlantis that's nearby that location, and what they did is they had us use our abilities to sense where the stuff was, and then we would get it from there and bring it back to the base. And then there was other side missions that they had us do, and then later on they had us do assassinations and all sorts of different stuff.
And the training was brutal. They had you confined in a tank with the shark, right, and with other creatures.
It was like a pool, so it's like we were underwater in this underwater base, and they had a pool there, and you could see the wind. Like there was windows where you could see outside. You could see the water outside, but they had these big pools that were there. And then like at first they brought you in, and there was older kids that were there, and there's some people that I remember their faces in the here and now, but they were there and they were a little bit older, and they taught us how to use our abilities. And then from that point, when they taught us how to use our psychic abilities, then they brought in like dolphins, and they got us used to basically interacting with the dolphins and going into their minds and taking the information of what they could see when they were swimming around these areas. And then what would happen is right after that, you would go into this door in this room where there was a one-way mirror on your right-hand side, and you would be sitting in at this table. There would be a table, a chair, and then 2 chairs on the other side of the table where there would be 2 guys that were naval intelligence, and you would debrief them. And they would keep, hounding you for every bit of information that you could get. Even if you thought that you didn't pick up something, they would keep hounding you until you remembered things that you didn't remember picking up. And then they would have you do it again and again and again. But after a while, what they did is they got you used to thinking that dolphins would be in the pool, so they would let you get into the pool. And then I remember them bringing a whale, a killer whale in, and when that happened, it scared the shit out of me because I was like a little kid in this pool with this big ass creature. I didn't even know what the hell it was at that point. So like I went into its mind, and then it swam around the pool, and then they basically told me that I had to keep going in its mind, and then after a while they stopped doing that, and then you know you would get in the pool and you would think, okay, it's going to be this creature, and then they brought in a shark. I remember them bringing a shark in, and the shark went to go attack me, and I remember like putting my hand out and like basically going into his, like I basically shot into its mind, and when I did, like the shark stopped where it was because I didn't do it gently, and it started swishing around, and then it finally caught itself, and then swam around the pool and just kept swimming around the pool around me. And I tried to get out, and the people that were there were like, "Get your ass back in the fucking pool," you know. So like they had no remorse, and it was like eventually, like the first emotion I got when I went into the shark's mind was like what a predator would think when it's hunting its prey, you know. Except for just more less intelligent, more. I mean, it's not less intelligent, but more just thinking eat, not like why am I eating? You know,
it can't exercise a spectrum of things. It's kind of just hot, cold, or black, white. There's no gray area. Or okay.
Yeah.
Well, they
So
are
it was
some of the
like,
oldest marine creatures, so it makes sense.
but after that, like I just remember that's the only thing I did anytime I was ever put in the pool with the shark. I just went into its mind to try to hurt it, to get it away from me, you know. And then they stopped bringing sharks in, and then they brought in, I believe it was like a squid, and then they brought in an octopus. And like with the octopus, what they did is they first like they had it shoot its black ink, um, and so we could try to maneuver around it. And then and the beings, there were these alien beings, like I said, that looked like octopuses, not fully, but more sentient, more humanoid.
What
But
color
they would
skin?
go in. They had the same kind of texture as the octopuses, from what I remember. Like it was the same skin. They were aquatic beings. Um, they could breathe underwater and everything, from what I remember. But they had 2 arms and 2 legs, and then they had like these tentacles. It almost reminds me of like trying to think of it, the Cthulhu almost in a sense.
A what?
Like Cthulhu. Like I don't know if you guys know anything about Cthulhu. It's like the
Yeah,
Cthulhu head.
did you end up finding any equipment that was back from Atlantis?
I don't have the memories of what we were getting yet. I just know that we did get that kind of stuff. I have memories of going through like an underwater city,
Whoa,
but it was like destroyed. I just don't,
right.
and I have memories of like sensing things, sensing objects that were there. And that's about it. I don't remember like digging it up and bringing it back. I just know that that's what our mission was.
Right. And jumping quickly into the origin of your Pindar altar. He grew up in an Illuminati family and had a really luxurious childhood, right?
No.
No?
My altar Pindar grew up in. I was taken when I was 8, and from that point, I was taken on a ship to a different planet, and the planet that we lived in this kind of base, and when we were living there, it was we lived in this house that is tied with the Draco. So they're heavily more reptilian than anything else, and they raised us pretty brutally. It was like there were humans there, and they were the ones who would train us and stuff. And there were Draco there too, you know, um, and that was the Shaw House. And
I was going to
it
say,
wasn't fun. There was no fun involved. They would shoot us up with drugs, like these vials with like these. They were like, I think they were like black vials and some other stuff, and they would if you messed up at all, you would get beaten like bad.
and I believe you were entrusted with the baby dragons.
Yeah, we were. As we got older, they gave us, depending on who you were, because it's basically like a branch of a family, and each individual is a branch of that same family bloodline. And there's different individuals, and what they did is they would give you these baby dragons, and you would raise them, You were supposed to take good care of them. I ended up losing mine.
But aren't they too powerful of a creature to be, just handed to a human, even though hybridized,
I don't
Maybe
know.
we're,
From what I remember, it was like a little baby dragon. It got about medium size, and then it got taken. Um,
I see.
but like it was more of a like it protected us. I remember that, and they it was like kind of a pet, but not really. It was a sentient, intelligent being. I don't know why they gave them to us. To be honest, I still don't understand that.
And of course, there's multiple types of dragons. Not all are equally imposing. Some are slightly lower intelligence, and maybe those were that type. I don't know. But I think the way they originally fingered you as a good project for them was by sensing your DNA, right? Like because they have the means to track angel and archangel and seraphim souls.
Oh, for Project Ibis, yeah.
Oh, okay. So not for the Illuminati family in Shaw House.
Um, I don't know. Well, from what I remember specifically for that, like when I came in to the specific body that I'm inhabiting, um, they there was a deal that was made, and that deal meant that I had to do certain things. So that's how that ended up taking place.
But it kind of goes to show that no one is safe, even if you have the most advanced souls around. So it's not like we sometimes hear that you get protection if you're, a certain refined
Well,
type of souls.
yeah, I mean,
It,
you have extremely advanced souls that you know they were either rivals of some alien species and they wanted to get rid of them. Like Penny's discussed it, they'll bring you to a planet like ours and kill you, and you're just stuck here, you
Mhm.
know, until that planet is freed, I guess.
Right. And moving on to Solar Warden, would you say that the way they tricked you into recruitment when they showed you that hologram of the solar flash and the Earth being, in flames and your family dying, it seems like it's so vivid and exact that it might have been a closed timeline. Would you say that's possible that they
Yeah,
somehow reproduced?
it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't a hologram. It like really happened, and they took me to the timeline that it happened on, and it was real.
Hmm.
You know, what I was under the impression of is that it was in the future, like our future. And when that altar had seen that, he basically took in, just like my other altar Pindar would, like when my other altar would show up and we destroy planets, he would take in and revel in those people dying. Except for John took it in and basically wanted to do the opposite.
And do you think that that really was their main purpose, is to just avert the timeline, or was it also exploitative to show you that?
I feel at this point, knowing what I know now, they were using it to exploit my emotions to get me to serve willfully.
Right.
It's easier to have somebody to serve willfully than to have somebody who doesn't want to serve.
It's a pretty good strategy anyway. But what age was your mind when you started Solar Warden? I think you were only 14 when you got picked up, right?
I was 12 when I got picked up,
Okay.
but yeah, they had been taking me and training me periodically too. So it's from the age of
Right.
8 onwards.
And
But
do they use altars?
Solar Warden,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. What was the length of the service?
To my knowledge, it was 20 years. That Alter John served for 20 years, and I believe that they basically tricked him into serving another 20 years. But I haven't had memory of that come back yet.
Right, right. And do they always use clones and through transfer of
Uh,
consciousness from your original?
from what I can remember at this point, yeah, Solar Warden uses clones mainly. They take your original child body and put it in cryogenic freeze.
And when it's in cryo, does it not age at all? So they just put it back at the end and it's like nothing happened?
It'd be
Or
like The
Does
best
it?
the best way to explain it would be I think that movie Simon Says or Demolition Man. You know, where they took the guy and they put him in, they cryogenically froze him in ice, and then they thawed him, and he was the same age that he was. It's just he was awake the whole time.
Right.
But
But
the difference is you're not awake, you're asleep.
but during that sleep, I guess, is the only time when you can say that you are devoid of a soul, right? Because it's in another body. It's forced.
Basically, it's in another body, so the body you're not there watching everything happen in front of you like in that movie, but your soul's out of that body. That body's unconscious, and it's just frozen.
Right. And from your experience, what's the percentage of bloodline abductees like you and Penny and so on versus the people who are voluntarily enrolled in Solar Warden?
I don't think anybody's voluntarily enrolled in Solar Warden. Even top military officials weren't voluntary. I mean, some of them probably were, but a lot of them weren't. They were just mind controlled.
So overwhelmingly, because I know of someone who I put quite a bit of stock in, so that is voluntary. So I would say that from comparing your accounts, I would say that the vast majority are bloodline abductees.
I've never met anybody that volunteered to Solar Warden. They might have assumed that they did, you know, like they might have been like, "Oh, would you like to go do this?" And they're like, yeah, not knowing what the hell they were getting involved in.
Oh yeah, he's not overjoyed about it. He also was strict partly, but it's just that he wasn't bloodline. He only had a high IQ, and that's why they enrolled him past the age of they usually abduct, which is like 20 or something. So it's kind of in quotes the voluntary part. But anyway, I understand.
What they do, from my knowledge, is they'll do a 20-year tour, and then they'll try to get you to reenlist again, and then you'll still be in your clone body at that time, and then they'll get rid of that clone body and give you another one, and then you'll basically serve another 20 years. That's if they can get you to reenlist willfully. If they can't, they'll erase your memories of whatever the situation was and get you to reenlist anyways.
And to reenlist you, they lie about payment. Am I right?
Yeah, they lie about payments for Solar Warden. Yeah.
And
you still have people walking around believing they're going to get a paycheck somehow. I'm still shocked at this, but
Randy Kramer keeps on thinking he's going to get paid.
I'm not going to say nothing bad about the guy. He's real, but yeah.
No, I love him. But yeah, he keeps on saying, oh, yeah, it's a technicality. They're hung up. You know, I might have to sue. As in, the point I'm trying to make is in no way is this implicit insult. I'm just trying to say he just still has faith in it. And I'm like,
if they pay you, they're admitting guilt, and they're not going to do that.
My point exactly. Anyway, go ahead, fellas. It's your show.
And would you say that the factions that you've noticed are overall comparable in terms of corruption, or is Solar Warden really less corrupt on the whole?
They're all kidnapping little children and raping and torturing and killing them and regenerating them so that they can do that stuff. So no, I don't think that any of them are good, man.
Right. And
I'll sleep over that.
And I understand they wanted you to have children in Solar Warden, and would they grow on the ships?
Yeah, what they did is normally what they would do is they would pair up people specifically for their abilities, and then they would take your DNA. The average way would be to take your genetics and mix them together, and take your sperm and the egg and put it together, and then have the child, and then they raise your child. The way it's supposed to be, you're not even supposed to see your own child. They raise it completely away from you. And they have a whole school and everything on the ship. You don't ever get to interact with them. And they raise them from childhood to adulthood. And I think the whole point of that is to basically replace the people that are here.
And to maybe stop the abductions and the
at least for the leadership portion of it, or just to stop having to use people like us. Makes it easier when you take them straight from childhood and raise them into a certain belief structure.
So maybe in a few generations, we're not going to have the same amount of injustice with the whole kidnapping of little kids.
Well, I mean, they're still taking little children. They're just taking our children instead. I mean, they're still taking our children even now, but
Just as much as before?
They've already taken children that we don't even get to see. You know what I mean?
And do they give a reason for this, like a justification for kidnapping children?
To my knowledge, profit. I mean, it's profit. They feel like they're at war. I know Solar Warden, like Penny's discussed, they feel like they're still fighting the Nazis. You know, so it's by any means necessary.
And have you noticed any Solar Warden outposts or colonies on other planets?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there are. I wouldn't see why they wouldn't do it. Everybody else is doing it.
Yeah, that's what I heard. And so, yeah, you probably served 220 back then, considering how that meeting went down with the higher officer when you couldn't read his mind after the first probing, right? He blocked you.
Yeah. Basically, because from what he told me out loud was that he was the one who trained the people who trained me.
Yeah. But he was old.
Yeah, he did have peppered hair, yeah. And he had a wife here on Earth and everything.
You would think they could maybe have the technology to reverse his age, but I don't know if it's a higher up, you know.
I would assume that the people that are mainly in charge that were working with the military, because there are people in the military that work willfully. Like, don't mistake that. There are people that do work willfully, doing this stuff and are doing it thinking that it's patriotic or whatever their belief is. If they're going to get a paycheck or a payout, you know, if they just do their job and keep their mouth shut. It's like, look at all the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Look how they retire. They may think that they're just getting it because, you know, being part of these corporations after the fact just because of their service, but they don't understand like the full length of what their service would entitle.
Though there's a minority of them who are opposing all of this criminality, right?
I mean, I would assume that there are some good people, or just they feel like it's either going to hit a wall and they don't want to be a part of the wall, you know, smashing into the wall.
Yeah, but they're a minority and there's nothing they can do about it. But
I would assume so, because we wouldn't be here if that wasn't the case.
Yeah. So moving on to Nachtwaffen, I didn't quite understand the purpose of your initial torture there, and the kids in cages there. Was it to further mind fracture you or what?
So from what I've remembered at this point, like I had that altar, and his name is Jimmy, and he served at Montauk. And then after Montauk had fell, basically he went on to serve with the Germans. And that's why he was put into a chair and stuff. That was just my alter Jimmy. He didn't want to sit there and help him because I guess he felt, you know, who they really were. He went into their minds and stuff. So they began torturing him to get him to work for them. He basically sold himself off to feed the people that survived from Montauk, that are still there at Montauk, in the Montauk vicinity, but they're at a underground naval base that's there instead of being at Camp Hero.
Yeah, and do you have any notion as to why your first mission for Nachtwaffen was being sent to be a clone of yourself in Misty Farm Isle?
To my knowledge, I think I was supposed to kill him, but it was supposed to be more covert, like not how I did it. That's what I'm gathering at this point.
And were you fast grown, that clone, and then just inserted, or did he live elsewhere as like a baby soul? Do you know?
I just know that was a clone child, and the chair that we used was basically a more advanced chair than the one that we had at Montauk. But what it does is it amplifies your mind, and I was able to use my abilities to jump into that clone body.
Right. And I maybe suppressed the original soul right there or something.
Yeah, basically, and I can do it without, like with that chair, I can do it without a clone. I can jump into anybody's body as long as their soul isn't strong enough to defend itself psychically.
And I think you got some triggering from reading the portion about you in Tony's book. And have you figured out why you said about the glass man, the green glass man that the Tom summoned there, the owner? And when you said that you waited your whole life for this, and I've come back for you because of what you did you get any further details about that?
The only thing I know is like there's a lot of time travel. So like when I was contacted, it was by somebody who served with my real self in the Ashtar Command, and they basically just reminded me that I had abilities that I didn't know I had, and I was able to use that ability. And when I did, it just scared off this being. Like it was like, what the heck? And they got really angry, but it left because it felt like it got brought there to be attacked.
Right. And this is a little random, but I noticed that you mentioned at one point that you actually witnessed ghosts while traveling in hyperspace. And would you describe what it was like and how did the crew react?
From what I remember, that was serving with Penny on that ship with Pindar, and basically her ability, we could travel faster through time by going into the fourth dimension, and the fourth dimension is the land of basically the dead world. There are beings there, and what happens is it's like you can come across blobs of these being creatures, and within that blob there's different souls. There's like dead people, not just necessarily humans, but like different beings. And what they do is they harass the shit out of you while you're going through that. We weren't even supposed to do that. Like technically, like she warned me against it, but I figured that we could cut down time and you know get back to relaxing instead of having to work nonstop. So I tried to cut time, cut corners, and we went through it. And eventually, like I almost lost my mind. But what it did is it freaked out pretty much everybody on the crew except for Penny, her alter that was there. Basically, were losing their shit because of it. And you could hear crew members screaming. That's what I remember, crew members screaming, and like you'd wake up and like you'd have the soul like physically touching you, and then you'd be like, oh, and then all of a sudden it'd be like, ah, like they fucking basically freak you the fuck out and scare the shit out of you. I don't know what they were necessarily trying to do, if it was feeding off the energy of fear or lust or whatever, or just causing people to go crazy because they were crazy. I don't know. But that's just what I remember. And I remember like finally eventually going to Penny's altar and being like, take us out of this. And she was like, well, if I do that, we'll lose time. And I was like, I don't give a shit.
Yep.
I couldn't, that altar couldn't handle it anymore.
And speaking of Penny, would you paint a picture of how did a planet destruction look like during and after, and were the planets still livable afterwards?
The normal destruction would be like taking a meteor and slamming it into the planet, and it would look like how they depict it in these trailers where they slam a meteor against our planet. It hits, it causes shock waves and debris and just decimates the vicinity. But we wouldn't just do it with one; we would do it with quite a few. And when you're throwing it at a planet, the velocity of it coming down gets even harder when it hits your atmosphere. So just that's basically it. Just watching meteors hit your planet. The other one that we did, there was one planet that had a device, a tech that encompassed the whole planet in this force field, and we couldn't hit it with meteors. And they thought that was going to save them. And because of Penny's ability to take things out of the third dimension into the fourth dimension, we came up with the plan to shoot one of our rockets off the ship, have her grab it with her telekinesis, and basically shift it into the fourth dimension send it into the core of the planet, bring it back in the third dimension, and cause an explosion. And that basically caused the crust of that planet to explode and crack and basically come apart.
So it wouldn't be a planet left anymore.
No, I mean, it was just pieces of the planet left. Yeah, it was in big chunks.
Our asteroid belt. I mean, didn't that used to be a planet? Is that true?
Yeah, Tiamat.
Are you talking about? Yeah, you're talking about Maldek or whatever it's called.
Yeah. I was just
both.
It was a. I mean, it wasn't that planet. Not that I know of. I mean, that'd be weird. But
no, that was long ago.
Yeah, but the planet that we destroyed, all I know is that the beings that were there, they died screaming, and they had the realization that whatever they thought was going to save them from the Draco getting their tax money and not killing them for not paying their taxes ended with them dying and their planet being destroyed. The next one basically had happened after that. I started to learn because Penny's altar had blown my head up. I started to learn that she had that ability. So I came up with the idea of her doing that to the core of the planet. And when I put her into doing that, like Matt Tracy's talked about, because he served on the same ship with us, she would fall to the floor like in a pile, just drop when she did it. But when she would use that ability, it would superheat the planet and it would explode in a more advanced way than a bomb going off in the core of the planet. And it got to the point where we would just show up and I'd have her send telepathic images of what we did to the previous planets that didn't pay their tax or obey. And they would literally tell us, we don't want to deal with you. You people are fucking crazy. Let us talk to the Draco.
I have to believe that destruction just using the mind was probably assisted by technology, right? Just seems a little disproportionate.
To my knowledge, it was not only her abilities being maxed out, the drugs that we were on enhanced our abilities, but on top of that, she had black goo in her, so it was more or less an AI that could take control of her body and enhance it even further. But she's a pretty powerful individual, even in the here and now.
True, yeah. And was it only ever a matter of not paying the taxes, or were there other reasons for planets being destroyed?
To my knowledge, I mean, we weren't even supposed to do what we did. We were just like dropping a meteor is one thing that planet could, re-inhabit life. What we did technically wasn't even supposed to be allowed. We got a lot of shit for it too.
So it wasn't like the Draco requested it; you just did it of your own volition.
Yeah.
Wow. It's harsh. But what's the reason for the Guardians' intervention mainly? Was it this destruction of planets, or was it the use of cyborgs, or was it the abuse of time travel, or was it all of them together?
I'm pretty sure it was a plethora. The destruction of planets, which, I mean, you're killing an entire being on top of other sentient beings. Which messes up the ecosystem, within a solar system. It's a lot of devastation. And then there's also just the other stuff we were doing. And, it's like we were not doing good things. Enslaving other beings, killing people who, disregarded our orders. Basically, the Draco are like, let's use this group of people to go do this, and then we'll deny all culpability and say we just asked them to collect taxes. However they did it, we just asked them to fight these people that disobey. However they did it has nothing to do with us.
Mm-hmm.
That way they can wash their hands of it. I watched them do it when we all got brought in before, like this extremely powerful group of beings that were a part of this council that I would assume was over the Guardians, because they were connected in the same situation where the Guardians blew that one planet up just to make a point, because clearly we didn't think that they were that serious.
Gave you a taste of your own medicine.
Yeah.
But before we move on to the council, did you manage to get a glimpse of the German colonies, and like were they inside the earth, or were they also some of them on the surface? And but yeah, did you get a hint of how what the civilization was like, the breakaway Germans?
Some altars in some different altars, yeah. I had my altar Saul. He worked on a Nachtwaffen ship that was, I think it did spy stuff on top of being a diplomatic situation. And as we would travel, um, they would be doing diplomacy with other beings and also spying on, you know, the vicinity, gaining information. But like we would get taken to this one planet where like you would be able to like relax. You know, they had this whole city that was there. There's another person that I met that was one of the people. I'm not going to go into too much of it because it's not just my memory, you know. But he basically oversaw the interactions with other alien species as a diplomat, and he was there, and we would go off the ship and go onto these different planets, and it was like a resort. They had like resorts, like city resorts, and you know, then there were, you know, there's the place in Antarctica. I've been there. It's, you know, it just depends. I've been to the one on Mars. There was a city that was on Mars. I've been there. You know, like they don't look extremely great to live in. Like
it's all underground, right? It was all built years ago, and everything is underground, right?
no, they have stuff that's above ground. They have like shielding that goes over like a capsule, like
Shielding
a
protect,
capsule shield.
shielding for you know, so it's stealthy, or both.
I would say for probably three purposes. Better oxygen levels, number one, and number two, yeah, stealth, because it basically has stealth technology, so you can't really see it. And then on top of that, I would assume that it probably has shielding, so if you try to shoot at it or hit it with something, it would probably deflect a good chunk of damage.
And so, would you say it's not a stretch to say that NASA and Google are working in concert? I'm sure, along with other things, to make sure this stuff stays scrubbed on things like Google Mars and just any sort of satellite zooming in.
Well, yeah, I mean, their own people have come out and admitted.
No, I know.
Even NASA, people that work for NASA have come out and admitted that they scrub the photos.
No, I just like having on record. I know it's redundant. I don't mean to insult anyone with these questions. I just like having.
Oh no.
Anyway.
I'm just saying in general, like they have come out and they have their credentials and they're like, yes, this is what we did, you know. So it's like it's pretty wild.
So when you were tried by what I assume is the Council of Five, what were their appearances like? I guess they were varied.
They varied, but I mean, to explain them, it's kind of hard, you know, because it's like I don't know what to equate them to. In a sense, there was like a yellow race of beings, and it was like there wasn't just one person, one being there. There was a group of their people there in the council chambers, and there was some that looked humanoid and some that didn't. Most of them didn't look anything like us, and they wore like really extremely bright colors. I mean, the council chamber was made up of like granite, some kind of granite. It was really like when you were there, you felt like you were being judged, and there was just a bunch of them. You know, there was like blue ones. I can't really quite pin down what all they looked like, to be honest.
But in general, they had 2 arms and 2 legs, I guess, right?
Yeah, they had like, well, I mean, they were a little different. Some of them were, but yeah, they pretty much sums it up. Yeah.
And what about
most of them did?
And what about the court? What did that look like?
I mean, it was like you had one guy, like one being. I don't know if it was a guy or a girl. It was just one being that was there that was pretty well in charge, and then you had a bunch of other groups that were there with their other species. So it was like you had one person that was there to speak on their species' behalf, and then you had some of their species there as well that they would debate with to decide if they would side, with whatever the decision was. And they were extremely powerful. Like they could teleport from one area to another with ease. They could walk into your mind as if you were like had the defense of a child. And it wouldn't even hurt you. Like they just walk straight into your mind. But from what I remember, they asked permission. I'm pretty sure that they didn't have to. It probably would have been very simple for them. They all spoke telepathically for the most part that I remember. And they know what your crimes were already. And so did you. Like it wasn't, oh, we're judging you. How do you defend yourself? From what I remember, it was you're judged. This is your crimes. Like, what do you have to say for yourself before we make our decision? And it's like, I just remember thinking it was more like a human court where you can defend yourself even if you're lying. But
yeah, I think their rules are very basic and transparent, so you can't hide behind words.
Yeah, I mean, they don't care what kind of being you are either. I watched them turn a Draco into a pile of goop because he insulted them. He went too far, thinking that he was something that he wasn't.
Mm-hmm. And do you remember the whereabouts? Like, was it inside Saturn or was it near Saturn?
I don't know where the hell they brought us to be honest. I was on the ship, and then I blinked out of existence from the ship, and then blinked into existence in this hall. And it was like a humongous, like, I mean, big. And I was just like a small thing in this big ass hall of different beings. And they did what they did. I tried to defend myself. I brought a bunch of people to defend me, and it didn't work. Other than the one being, and they didn't know who the hell I was talking about. So clearly, that being's name isn't what it's given. But when they went in my mind, they knew who I was talking about and grabbed that being and brought them there. And they were just as surprised as I was. And they were not. That being wasn't enthusiastic about what happened, but they explained what all I did when I served with them. And
you're
clearly, that being.
You're talking about Ashtar,
yeah, the one that calls themselves Ashtar, yes,
of course.
But clearly, that being, even when it hugged me and it was telling me out loud that this is the last time he would ever help me, when he went and hugged me before he left, he told me how to defend myself against what they were going to do to me. And he didn't stand there in like a long speech and explain everything that I did over that course of time. He just went in there. He explained a little bit out loud, and then went in their minds and gave them all the information they needed.
And what were the sensations of that extremely grueling punishment?
I mean, at first it was kind of like being a kid and playing around, because I knew how to get around it. But it was like they brought me onto this planet that had no sense of time, and there was just this scenery, and there was this being that could just materialize, and he was basically overseeing my punishment. And I just remember, doing what I was told to do to get out of it. And about the third time is when I just lost it, when he said he was going to leave me there for good. And I couldn't concentrate anymore. And that's when I just lost everything. And everything that would happen was, imagine if you went to go walk left and then you're like, what if I walked right? What if I didn't walk at all? What if I stumbled back and broke my leg so I don't have to be in that situation? That's basically what was going through my mind in every situation that I was put in, from the point of my birth to the point of where I was.
And you're talking about the sleeping tricks that Ashtar suggested to you. And do you think that they might have worked? I mean, they didn't work for you because you were a little cocky, but they probably would have
had
worked.
Had I not been cocky the first time, or even the second time, it would have worked had I just kept my fucking mouth shut, and it would have been like nothing, basically.
And also, was it your main altar that actually witnesses? Because I know that Pindar was in Nachtwaffen, so.
Yeah, it was my main body. He's one of my major altars, yes.
And I understand that it was such a life-changing experience that it still informs your decisions today.
Yeah, I can see that, because before I do stuff, I normally think about what will be the consequences of that.
Mm-hmm. And
Doesn't
this is
always
something
work out well.
Yeah. And I can't help myself but ask this: if you have the faintest idea of the difference between these many collectives that we hear about, like the Galactic Federation, Galactic Authority, Guardian Alliance, and Elohim, or is it impossible to say?
I mean, I'm pretty sure there's a shit ton of different councils. I mean, any group can get together and create a council. I mean, what weight do you really have? I guess it just depends on how many there are of you. But it's like this council the federation that people mostly talk about, this council, which is just a federation of different races in the solar system and a few other solar systems, right? They aren't really that big of anything when it comes to the Draco Empire. And if the Draco come in, they basically buckle because they're afraid of them.
Right. It's just that I am slightly tempted to believe that at least two of those overlap, because of the descriptions. They kind of match, but yeah, it's this type of thing is
Penny
impossible to
said is
tell.
that, from what Penny has stated, is that the Federation is also basically the Guardians, or
and the
the
Galactic
Council for the
Authority.
Guardians. Yeah, and the
Yeah,
Galactic Authority.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I think too. That's my biggest suspicion. And what was your rationale for your next action after this punishment, which was trying to free Earth?
Yeah, I mean, from what I remember, from the memories that I got, was they, in the beginning, before he went through that, they were questioning him, and he basically said he was doing what he was doing for the protection of the human species, for the human race, that he was doing it to protect his people. And when he said that, they questioned him, well, if you're doing that to protect your people, then why do you keep enslaving the humans that are on Earth? And they called him to question his honor, so he felt like they wounded his honor. So when he got the chance to go back and they sent him back to the ship, the guy that was standing there, that was another officer that was in front of him, he had already warned him, like he had called him as one of the people to witness, to say, hey, we're doing what we're ordered to do, you know, which kind of like in the Nuremberg trials, it didn't work out for them either, So he went back, and then they took him, and I ended up being sent back to the place because he wanted to ask me to be a witness, and he tried to help get me to defend him. And I was like, I already warned you, man, because he wanted to keep doing what he was doing. They wanted us to stop. That's what I remember.
And what did that plan actually entail? How were you going to go about freeing Earth?
Well, it was more like at a whim. So what had happened is when I came back, and that most of the top leadership that were on the ship with me basically got taken off the ship, and it was happening periodically with other people that were in charge of their ships. So as that was taking place, I knew that the biggest ship that we had some of our high command there. So I basically ordered Penny's altar to take all the ships in the armada that I was basically there in control of, and remove us from that area, leaving the one ship and taking us to the destination, which I gave her the exact coordinates for the Earth, for the planet Earth. And when we got there, I had already been making plans as we were traveling to basically decide on how best to make it happen. What I was going to do is, as soon as we got there, I was going to start dropping ships at all the pivotal locations for the government, wherever the crux of the world's different governments were. We're going to drop ships and basically decimate their government. And wipe any chance of any leadership out, and then take over from there.
And the fact that you chose Earth kind of shows that it kind of confirms the fact that it really is at the crux of this.
But
go ahead.
If something backfired, the secondary plan B was to drop a nuclear weapon, which we had, and to drop it in a certain location on the planet so that it would devastate the military and have them scrambling trying to figure out what happened, be focused on that so that we can move in and attack and advance even further. And like that timeline got stopped from happening. And then what that altar didn't realize, and it wasn't just him either, there was different altars that were shifting. Like I was shifting altars in that point, jumping from different altars, like 3 or 4 different altars at once. So everybody thought I was losing my freaking mind. Even Penny remembers that and was like, he's lost his shit, and my head was spinning, like she explained. My head was spinning, like I was everywhere at that point mentally. But the ship showed up, and a bunch of other ships that were part of a different faction, and they intervened in what we were doing. And when they did that, one of the individuals that, like, it was like right before that had happened, we had a situation where a lot of the ships were still in charge by Draco. There were Draco that were overseeing some of those ships, right? And
right.
I had gone on the intercom before the attack even occurred, and I basically given everybody the rundown of what was going on and why we were here. And there was a lot of humans that we had saved that were on the other planet that we were saving, and they tried to fight and rebel. And there was other ships, but we didn't have any of the ships that had the armaments. Most of those were being ran by people that were basically loyal to Draco, or they were Draco ran ships, and they basically turned on us to stop us doing from what we were going to do. But a majority of the people that I remember, when they saw Earth, a lot of them were like, "Whoa," because none of those people even knew that Earth even existed.
Right. Yeah.
So they freaked out and they were willing to do it. And one of the guys that was there got scared and dropped one of the nuclear weapons. And then time ended up getting fixed to stop that from happening. So there are beings that are trying to defend the planet overarchingly. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of laws and stuff to be followed.
And the faction that stopped you at that point, was it ICC, or could it have been the rebellious, breakaway of the Germans who went against the Black Goo allegedly, and the 20% of the Nachtwaffen that broke away?
No, it was more like the people that wanted Nachtwaffen to do what Nachtwaffen was supposed to do turned against us. And then when that also happened, we couldn't really move because we were outgunned. And we basically had to stand down because we were out, like I said, we were outgunned. And that accidental situation happened. But there are beings that intervene, that are really powerful, that don't look human whatsoever. They may have some arms or something like that, or different body structures. It's been talked about a little bit. They didn't want that stuff to happen. It's just not supposed to happen for our planet. What the reason is, I don't know. But because of that, time got shifted back. But then ICC got involved, and because we weren't supposed to do what we did, and the ICC is basically one of the biggest enemies of Nachtwaffen, vice versa.
Yep.
So we got captured, and when we got captured, they tortured the shit out of us, and at that point, my altar had given up because, he realized all the shit that he had done, so he just gave up, and he got left behind of his own free will, and he got tortured more, and then I got sent to Antarctica after that. They basically age regressed me. I had that altar at the surface, and that's when I ended up going into like Montauk. I went into Nachtwaffen before I even went into Montauk.
Yeah. They age regressed you though.
Yes.
And What year did this attempt to free Earth happen in?
I haven't quite narrowed that down yet, but that's something that I probably should do. It's just I've been mainly focused on a lot of the Montauk stuff that's been coming up, which is.
But it's in the future, right?
It may have already passed or may not have it. I don't know. I'm not sure yet.
Oh, okay. And you also were forced to drink black goo at a certain point, right?
Yes, I did have a different altar that served in Nachtwaffen that was forced to drink black goo. It was more like he wanted to join the group, but then he found out what all it was doing and it freaked him the shit out. But he was already in the middle of the ritual, so he didn't really have a choice.
And did you still have any? Did you still have any emotions and like a conscience while you were under it?
The very vague memories I have of that altar, and I don't even really know for sure what that altar's name is yet. Not really. It was like void of emotion. It was like being a robot in a sense, just in a flesh body.
Right. And is there any relation between Nachtwaffen and the Nazi faction that is, out and out evil intended, and that is hand in hand with the Dark Ones?
I think that, from my personal opinion, I think that they would align with them. I mean, they still have, from my personal opinion and what I remember and what I've seen, they still have slavery. They only care about their people mainly. Not that they won't take in other people, but they mainly care about German people and their history. And I mean, I don't really see the difference in a lot of what they've done yet, other than using people that aren't their people to go and do all their dirty work.
And could you make a brief definition of the Dark Ones and their takeover and the 1,000-year Reich that they plan?
Okay. From what I remember, is that there's these beings that are basically they're just evil, and how do you explain it? Like they align with evil, doing evil shit, and they group up together to do evil atrocities. I don't know what makes them want to do those things. I'd assume, either they're doing it freely or they're doing it because they're under control. Not sure. But what I do remember at this point is that when it comes to the situation with that 1,000-year Reich, that was Project Ibis, and that was a Nazi-ran group. And I'm still trying to sift through if the group that saved us wasn't the same, because they were still being overseen by a soldier that was straight up dressed up in a Nazi uniform, even though that they had other soldiers that were dressed in a military, like American and Canadian uniforms, military uniforms. But they believe in bringing forth this group that's been cloning and doing a whole bunch of other stuff in this different dimension and bringing them through the dimensional portal. And they might even be on a planet in the third dimension somewhere, doing whatever they're doing. And either way, they're going to open a portal and it's going to come here. And the point of Project Ibis was to take those individuals that they took and have them lead those armies to slaughter people wholesale, because we were brainwashed to do that, and basically take over, and not just here on Earth, but then they would expand outward. And from what I remember, when Nachtwaffen was presented in the situation, they sided with them. Just like they sided with the Draco Empire.
Yeah, I think you said that the union between Nachtwaffen and the Nazis was the least favorable of all the timelines you've seen. And what can you recall about it?
It was horrible, man. Like, we lost, and people were running. A lot of super soldiers were fleeing. They were being tracked down, hunted, and killed if they didn't basically activate like they were supposed to. There were these beings, these humanoid beings that they had, like you could sense from their minds that they had basically been used in
Mutated?
these experiments and mutated into these bat-like humanoid creatures, and they would fly around and attack and kill things, and then you would have the soldiers come through, and they would just they were just controlled completely. They would just follow orders without not even wavering. They would just march and just gun down and kill anything they were ordered to kill, and it felt like they weren't even human in a sense.
And is it true that the entity in charge of all of them is the actual white Draco that's called Pindar?
No, he wasn't in charge of them at all. I know that they didn't even want that white Draco didn't even want that to happen. That was not his intention whatsoever. That happened because of a different individual that was there, that is mind controlled to do what he was supposed to do, and unwittingly he got put in a situation where he could get away with it.
From that Pindar is using that feeds off Gaia, and do you know if it's inside the Earth, like in inner Earth, and what did it feel like? Because at one point you did manage to one of your altars to try it out.
From what I remember, sitting on it, it amplifies your abilities. It's basically like the Montauk chair, and if you're psychic, it amplifies the shit out of it. And it also feeds in energy, like you basically are feeding off of energy, but the energy is more negative than it is positive. But it empowers you and makes you really strong.
And how did the white Draco corrupt you? If I understand correctly, it was the Pindar altar, right, that did it?
Yeah, well, at first it was my altar Paul, who knew him when he served in that group. He ended up having interactions with this white Draco. And what had happened and occurred is he was basically told that he would be given the chair and given his position. And that altar's mindset was, I could fix things. But once he started sitting in the chair, it corrupted his mind, and Pindar took over. And when Pindar took over, basically the white Draco has used him ever since. Even though he doesn't really like Draco, he doesn't really have a choice. And what happens is that white Draco, if there's necessity and necessary missions or things that need to be accomplished, he will go into that body, take over, and basically debrief everybody on what they need to do. There's one guy that's there, and he's married into, from what I remember, he's married into the Rothschild family somehow. And he's there at all times, and he only leaves to go and basically disperse that information to other family, and then they go and disperse it up. It's a ladder of people basically, and that's what he does. And for some reason, that white Draco likes using my body. I don't know why, and I assumed that he was in a clone at this point. But he is in the here and now. He is active. I have met him, and during those 3 months, he used me because I was intervening in the shit he was doing.
Wow. So is Pindar's altar active in another body right now?
Yeah, he's in a clone body. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And
he goes to different places. Like sometimes he'll travel to the Vatican, from what has come up. Sometimes he'll travel to. He'll stay where where that black crystalline throne is. Sometimes he'll travel to a whole different location. It just depends on what he's doing. And there's not just one Pindar either. There's other people that were reared to be Pindars as well that are on this planet. Some know that they are now and haven't been public about it, and some haven't. But I know that he oversees those individuals as well.
And you mentioned that you're on your at least 6th time loop, and we're on our 5th, and that there's these time soldiers that get sent to fix these things, like regarding the dark ones. And have you met somebody that remembers all the same time loops as you?
So far, I have met one person that clearly remembers some of the other timelines. There are others that remember different things that are going to happen, and I don't know if that's just their other self seeping in somewhat or not. I don't know. They haven't been very clear about the full take on what they remember. Um, but those are the loops, So that a lot of what they're getting is from loops that I've already been through. But there are some that remember other loops, yeah.
And I believe that at least one of the previous loops was actually the success, right? The last one.
The one that I was a part of, yeah. The last one, which was the fourth loop, it wasn't successful. This one should be.
How
But
can
I
you
mean,
tell?
it's a severity of success though. It's like, you remember a lot of this stuff. You remember what the outcome of different things are. You try to avoid doing certain things so that you don't get those outcomes, and then you have to learn what the other outcomes are. And then you also have like different individuals that have abilities that are seers, so they can see the future, but the future is always changing. You know what I mean? So it's like they're going through loops that align pretty well, and then you go through individuals that have the ability to see things, and you can pretty much kind of control the timeline direction, but nothing is ever perfect. So it's like you might get a little further, but then you don't get as far as you did, or you get a little bit further than you did before.
Mm.
I've been a part of timelines because it's been more than 6. I've had a lot of different memories come back, and a lot of different timelines come back. And from what I can remember, is there's one like Penny's talked about, where the Draco show up and they basically hit our planet. Like that's a real thing. Because
They do what to our planet?
They destroy it, basically decimate it. It's like more or less they just basically bring us to heel. I remember being a part of that timeline. I remember basically becoming a slave guard in her area where she has this throne on the planet where they live. The queen that oversees the Draco. I remember exactly what she looks like, and basically we surrendered. But
And
when they came in with so many ships that you couldn't even fight back, and it was voted on by the populace. That's how that went down. It was voted on by the mass of the populace of the planet that they did not want to sell or give away any more humans for any tax to anybody because that was evil, and the majority of the planet did not agree with it, and they felt like the Draco Empire was evil and that we should defend ourselves against them and fight them. And it didn't work out the way that they planned.
and what does the queen look like?
She is a humongous. She's kind of like how they depict a white Draco, but way bigger, a lot fatter from what I remember. And she has white scales. Like she has beautiful scales. It's kind of intense. It's like you could see like a fluctuation of a rainbow from what I remember.
Iridescent. So there's
Glides,
iridescence to it.
yeah, and it just glides over her, and like she basically walks like waddles. She has a long ass tail and wings, and I don't know if she could fly with the wings. I mean, I think she's a little too big for that, but she treats us like she sees humans like you would see an ant. If an ant walked up and started talking to you, you'd be like, "What's this?"
Yeah, she's used to being venerated by everyone.
And I mean, she's a royal and she's really powerful. But there's four total empires that are in charge of a bunch of different areas in this galaxy. So,
But at the same time, you mentioned one timeline where you managed to, bit by bit, outthink or outfox the Draco black ships, right? You actually thwarted them at one point.
yeah, it's because in one timeline, I remembered being killed by them. We made it to this area where we found like they showed up basically and helped Nachtwaffen, and they decimated the ICC and basically brought everybody to heel under Nachtwaffen, and we were basically brought into Nachtwaffen rule. We couldn't fight back, and a lot of us died. And I remembered that they showed up, so we triangulated where they popped out of the fourth dimension into the third dimension, and we showed up there before them. and they had some ships that were cloaked, and most of their ships weren't. Okay, and I just remembered how it went, how they showed up, and then we fought there, and somehow we survived. You know, and I remember how we survived. I remember exactly what we did, and I remember that we almost didn't survive because they sent these Draco assassins aboard our ship, and they showed up and they started killing a bunch of our people on the crew to get to basically to get to where I was to kill me, so they could basically put an end to whatever was going on,
right,
without too much bloodshed. But I remembered that in a different timeline, and we ended up catching those assassins, and I ended up having them basically chop their heads off, and I took it to the deck of the ship, which enraged the Draco that's overseeing the armada that's coming. And when that happened, what I had done before that was there's an individual that's on that ship that can basically manipulate weaponry to explode, and I used her ability to manipulate the weaponry, and I knew about basically the ships that were cloaked. So I used there's this one guy that's on the ship, and he has a kid. But that guy that was on the ship when I first take over that ship, he gets caught raping some woman that's on the ship, and I ended up killing him. So I couldn't use his ability. But he had a son that was on the ship, so I brought the little kid on the deck of the ship, and what he could do is he could sense ships that were cloaked and see everything. So I used his ability to sense it, and basically was able to transfer what he could see into the woman's mind that could manipulate the weaponry. And I've met that woman, and she's like in her 20s. You know, she's not public though. But basically, she was able to do that. So she was able to manipulate the weapons for the cloak ships. And then what I did is I basically used the rage against themselves, and I showed them the severed heads of the assassins that they sent, and basically disrespected them to get him to fire his weapons at us. And when he did, it blew up a lot of their weaponry on their ships. And, you know, it was like, on top of that, we took bombs and used the same ability to transport those bombs on board the deck of their ships and explode them, and then move in with smaller ships and basically kill anybody that was trying to leave, that was trying to escape the destruction.
And is it safe to assume that that was also the timeline where the Brotherhood of Light prevails?
How do I explain this? Like, after the situation that happens, they normally leave, and I don't ever see them again. I just get left in a situation where I can start doing things with what little bit of ships I have. Normally what I do is I jump to areas where Nachtwaffen or the ICC are fighting each other because they don't work together. And I would go there and try to salvage their ships that were left behind and grab them before they could come back, and then basically try to refit what we could and man them. And then eventually got to a point where they realized what I was doing. So they tried to attack us, and then we would attack them and outnumber them, and then take their ship and their crew, and basically if they didn't submit to what we were doing, we would kill them. And from that point, we just kept doing that, trying to create less damage on whatever ships we were going after. And that was that stuff had occurred, and then the Draco ships were going to show up, so we went there with a pretty good chunk of armada of different ships from Nachtwaffen, ICC, but none of it's not some. It's not like what these people are trying to talk about of this alliance. It's not a freaking alliance. It's, you either submit to what's going on or you die. And normally we try to liberate planets that have other beings that are enslaved, and then we try to work with them to get them to give us manpower. And then whatever beings there are, we try to train them in whatever they can do. And it's a multi-species, military, in a sense. Ragtag military, I guess.
So do none of the factions survive in this scenario? Not even Solar Warden?
I remember that, well, Solar Warden, from my memories, is the first one we wipe out.
Wow.
As soon as we have a chance, because they don't have as much strength ICC was basically getting hit from both Nachtwaffen and us. And then we took out Nachtwaffen, which it wasn't easy. And it was like we'd have to go to their colonies and tell them, hey, you either stop working with Nachtwaffen or we'll kill all of you. And a lot of the times they would be like, we're not going to submit to you. You know, they support their space military, and we basically kill them all.
Damn.
We destroy their area so that they couldn't breathe. Their atmosphere would be gone, and we just decimate them. And eventually, after a few of those incidents happened, a lot of the rest started saying, "Look, we're done. We'll give up our military. We'll surrender." And when that happened, within the solar system, we had some of them. We had this council that was on Earth, and one of them was elected to be on the council to represent their people. The one that originally did that, he basically tried to betray us, and I learned that. And then in the next timeline, I ended up just shooting him in the head and telling him to pick a different person.
So you can call this somewhat of a positive timeline, right?
Well, I would say so. I mean, it's not. I would say it's not going to be the best of the best, but it's better. It's better than a bunch of people kidnapping your children.
Torturing.
You know.
Yeah. But I understand that this is one of a number of timelines that you are meant to salvage, because once you manage to integrate fully in a past one, you got this ability to shift between them, right? And so you're not just going to stop at this one. That's why it doesn't go so far into the future, because you have to move on, right?
Yeah, I mean, normally I get to a point where I think is good enough, you know, and I just stop and I fulfill my bargain. And then once that's done, I move on to the next different timeline that's separate from this. I'm not sure how many I've been a part of, to be honest, at this point, but I'm pretty sure that if I had the knowledge of all of that, I'd probably lose my freaking mind. But there's situations where I'll just be sitting down and I'll be like, something on the TV will pop up and I'll be like, I remember that. And I remember this comes out next, and this happens next, and this happens next. And I meet this person and I talk to this person. And if I don't do that, you know, and it happens in real time. It's kind of creepy.
Do you remember the two of us?
Yeah. I
Wow.
told you before, I remember in one timeline when I originally, from one of the original timelines I was a part of, you know, I wanted to be accepted. And I lied. This is why I don't lie, because there's no point. And I remember lying about artwork. It was stupid. It was some stupid shit. It was like, you know, the artwork that I put together with that. I lied about it, and I lied to you about it. And you searched it online and were like, this looks like this. This looks like this, you know. And I was like, oh, you know, so that's why I don't do that shit. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's why at this point, I don't really care if I'm accepted or not. I just come out and tell people what it is. And if they don't like it, they don't like it. If they do, they do. It's just up to them, you know.
What about, do you also remember music that is supposed to be new, but you already have memory, and movies?
Mainly movies. I don't really pay attention to music at that level, you know. Other people do. Like Penny's talked about that, you know. But for me, it's like just weird shit, because I normally like to watch TV. You know, that's how I relax. So, you know, just different movies that are going to come out that people don't know about. I'll just remember that it's going to come out, and then it does. Like Ninjamas, for instance. One of the things for like little kids for these pull-ups. I remembered those before they even came out, and they started playing it on TV, and I'm like, holy shit, that's creepy. You know.
All right. Now let's move on to maybe the last big topic, which is the most controversial, which is Ashtar Command. So, from what I understand, it's a peaceful group, and also varied like the council, but of course totally different. And they are not what we perceive them to be. They at least the more advanced ones, do they all mimic like Ashtar does, a body? So we perceive what certain things that they want us to.
I'd assume so, yeah. From what I recollect, like they're not in the body that you see. Like that's just, I wouldn't say it's a hologram, but it's more like they can go in your mind and make you see what they want you to see. Anybody that's a strong telepath can do that. I didn't get anything like that was evil from them, but it was like I was told early on that they couldn't show me their true form because if they did, my mind wouldn't be able to fathom it.
You would die given a certain amount of time.
I would assume that was what they were going with.
And
Could that be the case? I don't know. I mean, I would assume that if people saw a lot of these different aliens, they would probably go catatonic.
Yeah. But they didn't have to, I guess, lower their frequency just so you can be around them, right? Because to each other, I would guess they could perceive their true form, right?
I don't know if they had to lower any frequency or anything like that. I just know that they could travel at higher dimensions.
They could change.
They never really changed their form though, and there was humans that were on the ship, all sorts of different beings. They basically pick up beings from all different races and they have them serve on the ship. It just depends on like what their goals were, and
Yeah.
they take them from their goals. You know.
My speculation is that they downgraded when they were around humans, and then they showed their true form only when they were amongst each other. Because I know that they can change between densities, but that's just my speculation. So, but how come you managed to actually have sex with one of them, given that she wasn't in her true form? You know.
From what I recollect and remember, she was in a suit, and the suit that she was wearing, she basically stated that she wasn't going to take it off. So it was like the way that occurred is a piece of the suit opened up, and that's just how that worked. I'm not going to go into detail on that.
You did already, anyway. I'm going to link to your previous interviews. And you mentioned that the Council of Five didn't know Ashtar by name, and that it's a title, it's not an individual. And do you have any idea who he really is?
No, I don't.
Right.
That would be interesting too, though. But again, I don't know if it was the Council of Five or not.
Oh yeah, sure.
So I'm not 100% on that either. I just know that it was some council.
Mm-hmm. And they apparently are very strict about karma and have this religion that is based on a black and white God. Do you know anything else about that?
I've heard that. It kind of makes sense in a way about that God, just from what I recollect. But yeah, their whole thing is based off of karma, and that's just what they follow. They follow the law of karma.
And this spans multiple lifetimes.
Yeah, I mean, they were really old from what I remember. Like, I think one of them was like 1,000 years old. I think she was at like the end of her life or something like that when she was on the ship, from what I remember.
And the humans were mostly in the cargo bay. I guess that was most suited for them.
The majority of the humans were in the cargo bay. There were other humans that were around at different areas on the ship, but the vast majority were the cargo bay, yeah.
And you mentioned that you were still Christian at the beginning. Was your initial mind level just age 14?
Yeah, I mean, well, basically, I had aged on the ship like a normal person would.
But didn't you say that you had big muscles too?
Yeah, I served with them for quite some time at that point, yeah.
All right, so you accumulated those naturally.
I mean, they shot me up with nanotech when I first showed up on the ship. I would assume that nanotech probably aided in that. For metabolism, and I mean, the food that we ate, I'm pretty sure that it wasn't just steak and cake, you know what I mean? I'm pretty sure that they had different things in it.
But they would have also had to age reverse you, right? I mean, keep you the same age.
And yeah, they have the technology to age reverse, yes.
Do you remember how they did that?
There was this capsule pod that they put us in, and basically it would just age regress us.
Mm-hmm. And can you recall the time that what changed you from being a Christian?
It was more like I saw what they could do, and I saw what I was doing didn't do anything. You know.
So it was during your Ashtar service that you realized.
Yeah, I mean, basically they had abilities to do things that I thought only God could do. And anytime I prayed to God, I never got any response back or bullshit like that, you know. So it was everything that they were doing, things were happening, and what I was doing really wasn't doing anything. But they didn't try to force me to follow what they were doing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I just tended to learn it and understand it and just go with it at that point.
And regarding that time that that person you had sex with mentioned that you were a young soul, was she referring to just this fractal that you represent now? Because at the same time, the council claimed that you had 6 million past lives, so you can't be that new.
I would assume that her soul is probably way older than mine.
Wow. Older than 6 million past lives.
Yeah, I would assume that the souls that inhabited the bodies that or what looked like the bodies that they were presenting were way older than ours.
Wow. And could you go briefly over what the real REL of planets showed when they showed the percentages of darkness and light over any planet?
From what I remember, I can't remember like the planet names. I just remember them. There was a screen with the woman that was there, like kind of like a newscaster, except for she wasn't talking about like, oh, this is what the weather is, or there's this catastrophe. It was basically all playing. This planet, such and such, has fallen to the dark ones again. This planet has has been taken over by the light. Where this planet is starting to become more aligned with what we want, stuff like that, basically.
Right.
But it was just different planets, and I never heard my planet on the reel, and I never got to see TV from our planet that wasn't from like black and white movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as not to influence you, but was the showing of the percentages of darkness and light only meant to satisfy your curiosity, or was it that they actually used it to intervene in such scenarios? I ask because from what you said, they only really stepped in planets that were really in dire situations that needed help, like boxes of food and such.
To my recollection, the group that I was serving with was more like how you would perceive a medic, coming on the battlefield to keep people alive. Whereas there was a military branch that would go and kill the enemy, but we weren't a part of that in a sense. So it was like there was a forceful group. They worked along with them, but took their resources to just go and do a more pacifist uh, alteration. But it didn't always happen in the right way,
So,
like I said, they left food and they were like, okay, this group's going to survive, but somebody that was evil could take over, and use what they gave to manipulate the planet in a sense,
So they were not at all involved in liberations.
No. I remember that they allowed me to do stuff, but they never got involved more than to give me like armor and weaponry for the defense of my survival, but that was it. And whatever I did on the planet that I was on, because I only did it on one planet that I can remember at this point, it was like I was there with just whatever group was there trying to survive or trying to overthrow whatever tyrant they had.
And would you recommend that other, say, angelic or archangel or seraphim souls they also call out to Ashtar because that's apparently how you got their attention, is by calling out and wanting to expressing the intent to save the planet, right?
Yeah, that's how I did it. The issue is moving forward is that we have CIA that will contact them and act like they're Ashtar Command using V2K tech, or just different groups. So if you want to do stuff like that, the best way to do it is to wear an EMF cap. If you're going to contact any beings, for that matter, just to at least alleviate V2K. But you also have to take in consideration, if you put your mind out there and you're just trying to talk to whoever, you have no idea who you're inviting in. Like, from my perspective now to then, I was very stupid for doing what I did. And I got picked up by a lot of different groups because of my stupidity.
At the same time, you could say that this was just part of their time wars too, and they had the technology to sense what was about to happen, and without them, you couldn't have done the successful timelines, right? So they played a major role.
For sure.
Yeah. And how much of the universe is undergoing these rescue missions by the Ashtar Command?
I mean, there was a trajectory of we went from point A to point B and then back to point A. So it was like we were going to different planets, traveling along, stopping at these certain planets and helping them do certain things. And then we would move along and go to another planet, move along, go to another planet. And then basically, like it was explained to me, we were returning in that direction, but we weren't. Their average thing was, we're not going to return and help any planets. We're just going to leave them be and go back to where I was dropped off. For me and for other groups that were on the ship.
And you also said that you visited other galaxies, right? And
we straight up went out of this galaxy into a whole different galaxy, and we were helping planets in a totally different galaxy from ours.
And go over a little bit of the differences in, say, the air, the gravity, just the nature. Is it adaptation that you need?
To my knowledge, no. It's the same. It's just when you go to different planets, you have to adapt to those planets depending on what's going on with them. Just like in the here and now, some of the missions that I remember going on, we had to have blood transfusions to get us ready to go to a different planet that, basically you had to have a certain kind of stuff that was already on the planet in your system.
And you also had those smart suits.
Yes, we also every group I've served with so far has had smart suits.
Yeah, and
some were blue, some were black, some were, there's different colors, gray.
And what are the standards for who they pick up on Earth, if you know?
From what I recollect, for the humans that were on the ship, they mainly picked up people that were pretty much already mentally broken, and they were going to help them along with them helping them in return. Most of the people that were on the ship, they might have had certain ideologies or whatever, but most of them had the same mindset that they wanted to help and do something.
So they were all damaged.
Yeah, I mean, maybe some of them weren't, but I know that the ones that ended up with me on that one planet definitely were not the same after what happened.
Interesting. And do they take people temporarily, or is it always a set amount of number of years?
I know that we were never forced to stay on the ship. They always were willing to take us back right where they got us if we didn't act in a certain fashion. They'd be lax. They would be lax a little because things are new to you, seeing other beings and stuff that's new. But if you carried on and were more bigoted towards other species, they would be they just take you back where they got you and just leave you.
But There's also the time that you said that you were learning martial arts and you picked up a fighting instructor in his sleep, right?
Yeah, it was. We went back in time because I wanted to learn how to fight as a samurai. Because I talked to this one individual that was one of the soldier. He was like a soldier or guard on the ship, and he wasn't even a human. He was an alien, and I was bored as shit because I basically was like a guard who guarded the cargo bay and watched all the humans and what they did, which was just something that I wanted to do,
It's
and
kind
that's
of
why
pointless,
he
right?
let me do it. Yeah, it was pretty much pointless, but it got really boring. And he had mentioned, "Hey, have you tried the training room?" And I was like, "What the hell's the training room?" Because most of my abilities came from other memories. Like they help me integrate alters that, and I think that's why I'm able to do a lot of what I'm able to do because I did a lot of meditation, a lot of integration work unwittingly, you know. But from what I remember, we had an interaction, and he was like, "Hey, have you tried the training room? You can learn whatever you want." And I was like, "He's like, if you're that bored, do this." And I was like, "Sure, okay." And then he took me to this room, and I had told him previous like what I wanted to do. I walked in the room; it was just a still room, and there was this guy that was dressed like a samurai. He only spoke Japanese. I had to use a device so I can understand him, and when we activated the device, he spoke English just like I spoke basically Japanese to him. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it auto translated. And he at first did not want to do it, but I basically lied to him and told him that if he didn't help me, I'd have to conscript him because I needed his abilities.
But he got
And
returned.
yeah, he basically got returned, and we returned him pretty much every night. Like we picked him up at night, put him back in his bed, picked
So
him
for
up,
all we
put him back in
know,
his bed. And then eventually, what had happened was is when as he was training me on how to use the sword, and he basically taught me different techniques and stuff, and I remember them. He And not just from that, like I also remember stuff from Montauk too when it came to swordplay. But from what I remember, like he was a brutal trainer, and it was no holds barred with him. Um, and I remember at some point he got interested and was like, "What do you really do? I want to come with you and see what you do." And we went on some mission where we fought this Draco, and I took a sword with me, and he took his sword, and uh, I remember we went and we fought this Draco, and I hit the Draco with a sword, and the sword broke on his armor. And when that happened, the person who trained me was like, "Holy shit!" and totally turned around and ran. The samurai literally basically shit himself and ran, and I was like, "Wait," and like I ended up running with him, and there was another one or two other individuals that were with me, and we all ran. And then I was like, "I thought you were never supposed to run away from a battle." And it was like, he basically came up with some excuse and was like, when you're outnumbered and you run, basically the common sense is when you're outnumbered and you run, you live to fight another day. He just said it in a different way, you know. And eventually, like we ended up fighting other beings. That's just what I remember after that. But I remember he had a wife and kids, you know, and that's one of the reasons why he trained me because he didn't want to be conscripted into something he didn't even know and never see his wife and kids again.
but also aren't Draco twice our height? So
Yes.
you're gonna need more than a sword, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that sword didn't do anything.
And also the translation device that you mentioned, that was also telepathic and audio. That also proves that if you're using chip implant, thinking that you're communicating with Ashtar, that is just disinformation, right?
I would say if you're taking chip implants and you think you're communicating with Commander Ashtar, you're not. Commander Ashtar doesn't need chip implants. He can straight communicate to you with telepathy. But also you have to understand, just because you're talking to a being that's giving you loving feelings does not mean you're talking to a good being. Which a lot of people focus on. Oh, well, I don't feel anything bad. That doesn't mean anything. Right? Like these same beings weren't presenting themselves the way they really were, even when they took me. Not that I have any bad memories, I have bad memories of situations that happened in the process of serving with them, but most of my memories aren't them doing anything bad necessarily, you know. But yeah, if you think you're talking to them with a chip implant, they don't need that. They can put up telepathic defense in your head and talk to you without anybody finding out. They can talk to you with telepathy. They don't need to have a chip in your head.
No. That's old hat.
The only time you need a chip in your head is like, I know Knockwalking does that, so because you're chipped into a ship, like Penny's discussed. But that's more human groups that do that, or Greys.
It's possible that they would have upgraded too to wireless. I mean, to telepathic type devices that don't need the implant, right? Because this Penny's account goes as far back as 6 years ago.
I would assume that some of their tech is advanced, but it's still, it's still implants that they're using.
Oh, okay.
But you can use telepathy without it. Most of the people that served could use telepathy without it. It's just that was to cut out other groups from knowing what you were doing.
Right.
But it's more, it's kind of more naive because there are aliens that it doesn't matter if you have a freaking chip implant.
Yeah. And the toilets used water, whereas the showers only used vibration, maybe sound-based, right?
Yeah, on that ship they used vibration, and it was like really distorting. But like I said before in other interviews, I've never been cleaner in my life than when I used that tech.
And say you died in battle, would you get revived?
When I was serving with them, to my knowledge, I don't have any memories of dying yet. So I don't know. I would assume so. They have tech to do to age regress. I'm pretty sure they have tech to clone. I'm pretty sure that they have regen tanks as well.
You didn't die, but you did kill someone, right? How did you get away with shooting the guy that disobeyed you on that planet in the head?
Necessarily, I didn't. I had to go and turn myself in.
Eventually,
but
yeah.
it was more like a karma situation. Um, he wasn't judge or jury against me. It was just like, you committed a lot of these things. I don't know what to do with you right now. And I was like, because I killed a majority of those beings that were on the planet, I basically had to go be judged by their people. That was an option. That wasn't what he wanted, but I ended up doing it anyways. Because I wasn't a murderer at that point. It's just I altered out and was in a traumatic situation, and I just lost my shit in that situation and shot that individual.
It does show that they're quite forgiving and understanding, right? Because usually they don't accept violence or low vibe behavior of any kind, except maybe righteous anger.
Yeah, I mean, he did have like righteous anger. I could sense it, like his emotions, and like you could tell when he was angry, but it wasn't like I'm gonna hurt you or kill you. It was more like, if you're a parent and you're like, why'd you put your hand on the on the glass for the fireplace? I told you not to do that. You know what I mean? Um, that kind of a situation versus you're a scumbag. I'm going to kill you because I can, and I'm angry because I want to hurt you.
And what about their level of technology? Was it ahead of the human SSP, like maybe their weaponry or such?
Yeah.
I would think.
I mean, they didn't even need technology. That's the reality.
They just use their mind first for combat?
I mean, they had a lot of advanced tech, but more or less, they didn't need tech. Like, they could probably, I would say that being could probably show up and kill everybody in the vicinity just with his mind.
Right. And I'm curious, do you think that mind fracture could ever be performed like ethically, or is it always dark?
I mean, what would be your definition of ethically?
In a way that, is lawful, doesn't it doesn't entangle you karmically, is in accordance with natural law and stuff like that, doesn't really have any disadvantages, but is done properly, I don't know exactly, but.
You mean like, can we mind fracture people without raping them?
Yeah,
And
like, is
doing a
there
lot of the more
actual,
negative things? Is that what you're basically getting at?
yeah, like, is this mechanism, does it have a hidden purpose after all? Because it can't be there, accidentally. Maybe it was just the fact that we don't know how to harness it.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that you could probably use VR tech and more advanced tech to do it without, or even psychic abilities like Matt Tracy's discussed it, you can go in with your mind if you're a strong enough psychic and actually create an altar and, compartmentalize that altar. What would be the purpose of that would be my question. What direction are you trying to take that in? Like, why would you want to do that?
Well, when you said that you got a lot of extra abilities once you manage to fully reintegrate, like the ability to jump timelines, I would think that it was a necessity for you to have had the altars in the first place.
I think that those abilities can be done without any of that. Granted, you would have to push. The reality is you would have to push those beings. At this point, if we were going to do it at this point, you would have to push those beings to their limits for their psychic abilities to come out. And then after that fact, then would take place the training of those abilities. But I'd assume that once we hit the certain population quota that we need on this planet and everybody becomes psychic, even if they're low level psychics or whatever, it doesn't matter. People will be telepathic, it won't really matter. Then you can just start training the abilities. Everybody has different abilities. It's not just psychic abilities either. I mean, a lot of it's psychic, but it's just manipulating your surroundings.
So there's no real practical use in your view for a mind fracture?
No.
Okay.
I mean, we have the capacity at this point to give whole classroom educations, feed it into your subconscious, and then manipulate it to where you can bring it to your conscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
Just with VR tech. So, I mean, you wouldn't even have to mind fracture somebody for that.
I see. Oh, yeah, well, I actually had a bunch more questions about Montauk, but I think it's best to leave that for another time because we're already past the 2-hour mark, and also about who you represent at soul level. Had a few questions about that. I think 2 hours is a more digestible chunk for people, so this is a good time to call it a night, I think.
Okay.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming, and yeah, see you soon.
All right. Take care.